Excuse me. Okay. Hey everyone, hope you had a great weekend. Starting off, for Helldiver's Quest this week, Plan 3 has been selected through the vote. That is to back off quietly and meet whoever infiltrated the base in the eastern building, where you may get local information to form a plan. Deciding instead of at noon, I'm going to call the vote at the beginning of Monday streams. And then going forward, Thursday nights will be Helldiver Quest. So with that admin work out of the way, let's jump back into reading some Lovecraft. It feels like it's been a month since last week. I don't know why. I mentally dumped everything from this Call of Cthulhu story. Let's try to remember what happened. Our point of view character is the nephew of a professor of something who was obsessed with a Cthulhu cult. Through that, there is a ancient stone idol of some sort that is recovered, and we just went through a lengthy flashback sequence to the professor uncle going to a academic conference of archaeology or something, and got another flashback from a police investigator who got the idol from a voodoo cult. That sounds about right. Can't remember any other big plot details that I'm missing. It's been one flashback after another as we explore the novelties, I guess you could say, of this Cthulhu cult, which I think is obvious at this point that it's Cthulhu. With the mention of the old ones, Cthulhu actually himself has been name dropped. Yeah, he was, because Cthulhu got name dropped as the priest of the old ones, who will revive them. The old ones are dead, but even though they're dead, they're not dead because they're beyond mortality, or whatever. Actually, here we go. Here's a nice little quote. That is not dead which can eternal lie, and with strange eons even death may die. That is describing, I guess, the life or death cycle of the old ones in Cthulhu, who now sleep in their city mausoleum place that's sunken into the ocean or something. Sounds about right. I don't know. Again, it feels like it's been a month since I was reading this last week. I don't know. Maybe I was just mentally drained this week and I forgot everything. But let's jump right back into it. We left off here in this third paragraph. I'm gonna start up here. Maybe we can remember where we left off from. All right. So let's get back into The Call of Cthulhu by H.P. Lovecraft, written in 20-something. It was one of his earlier works, I think. Okay. Legrasse, deeply impressed and not a little bewildered, had inquired in vain concerning the historic affiliations of the cult. Castro, apparently, had told the truth when he said it was wholly secret. The authorities at Tulane University could shed no light upon either cult or image, and now the detective had come to the highest authorities in the country and met with no more than the Greenland tale of Professor Webb. Webb is another professor at that academic circle convention thing, and he encountered a satanic cult in Greenland who are also Cthulhu worshippers of some sort. We had another flashback about that. Okay. The feverish interest aroused at the meeting by Legrasse's tale, corroborated as it was by the statuette, is echoed in the subsequent correspondence of those who attended, although scant mentions occur in formal publications of the society. Caution is the first care of those accustomed to face occasional charlatanry and imposture. Charlatanry? I don't think that's the right word. Or proper word. Legrasse for some time lent the image to Professor Webb, but at the latter's death, it was returned to him and remains in his possession. Possession. No R in there. Where I viewed it not long ago. It is truly a terrible thing, and unmistakably akin to the dream sculpture of young Wilcox. Wilcox was a artist who the uncle professor interviewed or something. Vaguely remember that. Sounds right. That my uncle was excited by the tale of the sculptor, I did not wonder, for what thoughts must arise upon hearing. After a knowledge of what Legras had learned of the cult, of a sensitive young man who had dreamed not only of the figure and exact hieroglyphics of the swamp-found image in the Greenland Devil tablet, but had come in his dreams upon at least 3 of the precise words of the formula uttered alike by... I forgot this. Eskimo. I think Lovecraft didn't quite know how to spell Eskimo. Eskimo Diabolus and mongrel racist Louisianians. Louisianians? That's another misspelling there. Again, early in Lovecraft's writing career. I think he couldn't afford a dictionary back then. Where was I? Louisianians. Professor Angle's, that's right, Mango Angle. Professor Angle's instant start on the investigation of the utmost thoroughness was eminently natural, though privately I suspected young Wilcox of having heard of the cult in some indirect way, and of having invented a series of dreams to heighten and continue the mystery at my uncle's expense. The dream narratives and cuttings collected by the professor were, of course, strong corroboration, but the rationalism of my mind and the extravagance of the whole subject led me to adopt what I thought the most sensible conclusions. So, after thoroughly studying the manuscript again and correlating the theological, I think he means, and anthropological notes with the cult narrative of Legras, I made a trip to Providence, Rhode Island, I guess, to see the sculptor and give him the rebuke I thought proper for so boldly imposing upon a learned and aged man. Wilcox still lived alone in the Fleur-de-Lis building in Thomas Street, a hideous Victorian imitation of 17th century Breton architecture, which flaunts its stuccoed front amidst the lovely colonial houses on the ancient hill, and under the very shadow of the finest Georgian steeple in America. I found him at work in his rooms, and at once conceded from the specimens scattered about that his genius is indeed profound and authentic. He will, I believe, sometime be heard from as one of the great decadents, for he has crystallized in clay and will one day mirror in marble those nightmares and fantasies which Arthur Machen evokes in prose and Clark Ashton Smith makes visible in verse and painting. Dark, frail, and somewhat unkempt in aspect, he turned languidly at my knock and asked me my business without rising. When I told him who I was, he displayed some interest, for my uncle had excited his curiosity in probing his strange dreams, yet never explained the reason for the study. I did not enlarge his knowledge in this regard, but sought with some subtlety to draw him out. In a short time, I became convinced of his absolute sincerity, for he spoke of the dreams in a manner none could mistake. They and their subconscious residuum. Oh, there's a residuum. And their subconscious residue had influenced his art profoundly, and he showed me a morbid statue whose contours almost made me shake with the potency of its black suggestion. He could not recall having seen the original of this thing, except in his own dream bas relief. But the outlines had formed themselves insensibly under his hands. It was, no doubt, the giant shape he had raved of in delirium, that he really knew nothing of the hidden cult, save from what my uncle's relentless catechism had let fall, he soon made clear. And again, I strove to think of some way in which he could possibly have received the weird impressions. He talked of, he talked of his dreams in a strangely poetic fashion, making me see with terrible vividness the damp cyclopean city of slimy green stone, whose geometry, he oddly said, was all wrong. And here with frightened expectancy the ceaseless half-mental calling from underground. Cthulu Fatagan, Cthulhu Fhtagn. These words had formed part of that dread ritual, which told of dead Cthulhu's dream vigil in his stone vault at Raleigh. And I felt deeply moved despite my rational beliefs. Wilcox, I was sure, had heard of the cult in some casual way, and had soon forgotten it amidst the mass of his equally weird reading and imagining. Later, by virtue of its sheer impressiveness, it had found subconscious expression in dreams, in the bas relief, and in the terrible statue I now beheld. So that his imposture upon my uncle... Imposture? Huh? That's the wrong word. I think it means imposition. Anyways, so that his imposition upon my uncle had been a very innocent one. The youth was of a type, at once slightly affected and slightly ill-mannered, which I could never like. But I was willing enough now to admit both his genius and his honesty. I took leave of him amicably, and I wish him all the success his talent promises. The matter of the cult still remained to fascinate me, and at times I had visions of personal fame from researches into its origin and connections. I visited New Orleans, talked with Legrasse and others of that old-time raiding party, saw the frightful image, and even questioned such of the mongrel brood prisoners as still survived. Old Castro, unfortunately, had been dead for some years. What I now heard so graphically at first hand, though it was really no more than a detailed confirmation of... twisting my tongue tonight. A detailed confirmation of what my uncle had written, excited me afresh, for I felt sure that I was on the track of a very real, very secret, and very ancient religion, whose discovery would make me an anthropologist of note. My attitude was still one of absolute materialism, as I wish it still were. Keep my tongue straight here. And I discounted with almost inexplicable perversity the coincidence of the dream notes and odd cuttings collected by Professor Angle. Good old Angle Mangle. Or was it Mango Angle? Probably Mango Angle. Excuse me. One thing I began to suspect, and which I now fear I know, is that my uncle's death was far from natural. He fell on a narrow hill street leading up from an ancient waterfront, swarming with foreign mongrels. Rude. After a careless push from a gentleman sailor. Gentleman is a racial slur. I had to censor out. I'll let you guess which bomb it is. From a gentleman sailor. I did not forget the mixed blood and marine pursuits of the cult members in Louisiana. It would not be surprised to learn of the secret methods in poison needles, as ruthless and as anciently known as the cryptic rites and beliefs. Legrasse and his men, it is true, have been let alone, but in Norway, a certain seaman who saw things as dead. Might not the deeper inquiries of my uncle... that my uncle, after encountering the sculptor's data, have come to sinister ears? I think Professor Angle died because he knew too much, or because he was likely to learn too much. Whether I shall go as he did remains to be seen, for I have learned much now. So it sounds like we're now entering the present tense for this story, after getting through all the preamble and the flashbacks. So that's cool. Part 3, The Madness from the Sea. If heaven ever wishes to grant me a boon, it will be a total effacing of the results of a mere chance which fixed my eye on a certain stray piece of shelf paper. It was nothing on which I would naturally have stumbled in the course of my daily round, for it was an old number of an Australian journal, the Sydney Bulletin, for April 18th, 1925. It had escaped even the cutting bureau, which had at the time of its issuance been avidly collecting material for my uncle's research. I had largely given over my inquiries into what Professor Angle called the Cthulhu cult, and was visiting a learned friend in Paterson, New Jersey, the curator of a local museum and mineralogist of note. Examining one day the reserve specimens roughly set on the storage shelves in a rear room of the museum, my eye was caught by an odd picture in one of the old papers spread beneath the stones. It was the Sydney Bulletin I have mentioned, for my friend has wide affiliations in all conceivable foreign parts, and the picture was a half-tone cut of a hideous stone image almost identical with that which Legrasse had found in the swamp. Eagerly clearing the sheet of its precious contents, I scanned the item in detail and was disappointed to find it of only moderate length. What it suggested, however, was of portentous significance to my flagging quest, and I carefully tore it out for immediate action. I read it as follows. Mystery derelict found at sea. Vigilant arrives with helpless armed New Zealand yacht in tow. One survivor and dead man found aboard. Tale of desperate battle and deaths at sea. Rescued seaman refuses particulars of strange experience. Odd idol found in his possession. Inquiry to follow. The Morrison Company's freighter Vigilant, bound from Valparaiso? That's a Central American port. Valparaiso arrived this morning at its wharf in Darling Harbor, having until the battled and disabled but heavily armed steam yacht. Alert of Dunedin, New Zealand, which was sighted April 12th in south latitude 34 degrees 21 minutes. I think apostrophe is minute, quote is seconds? I forget. West longitude 152 degrees 17 feet. With one living and one dead man aboard. The Vigilant left Valparaiso March 25th and on April 2nd was driven considerably south of her course by exceptionally heavy storms and monster waves. On April 12th, the derelict was sighted, and though apparently deserted, was found upon boarding to contain one survivor in a half-delirious condition and one man who had evidently been dead for more than a week. The living man was clutching a horrible stone idol of unknown origin, about a foot in height, regarding whose nature authorities at Sydney University, the Royal Society, and the museum in College Street all profess complete bafflement, in which the survivor says he found in the cabin of the yacht a small carved shrine of common pattern. This man, after recovering his senses, told an exceedingly strange story of piracy and slaughter. He is Gustav Johansen. Johansen? I guess it would be Johansen. A Norwegian of some intelligence, and had been second mate of the two-masted schooner Emma of Auckland, which sailed for Callao, February 20th with a complement of 11 men. The Emma, he says, was delayed and thrown widely south of her course by the great storm of March 1st, and on March 22nd in, wherever that is, latitude and longitude, encountered the Alert, manned by a queer and evil-looking crew of Echoes and Half-Case. The hell is it? Okay, that's weird enough. I'm gonna have to Google that real quick. What the hell is a Kanika? Kanikas. Indians? An Indian name. Huh. Kanika Pacific Island worker. Kanikas were workers, a mix of voluntary and involuntary from very specific islands. Okay, got it. That's interesting. Never heard that word before. In half case. Caste implies Hindu? Although I suspect, knowing Lovecraft, he means something more racist. But we're going to gloss over that and just keep moving. Being ordered peremptorily? Peremptor? What the hell? Okay, I'm not going to Google that. To turn back, Captain Collins refused, whereupon the strange crew began to fire savagely and without warning upon the schooner, with peculiarly heavy battery of brass cannon forming part of the yacht's equipment. 1920s? Okay, I guess they would have that back then. Post-World War II. Like a mortar. I don't know. I'm not a Navy person. Whatever. Brass cannon forming part of the yacht's equipment. The Emma's men Showed fight, says the survivor, and though the schooner began to sink from shots beneath the waterline, they managed to heave alongside their enemy and board her, grappling with a savage crew on the yacht's deck, and being forced to kill them all. The number being slightly superior because they're particularly abhorrent and desperate, though rather clumsy mode of fighting. 3 of the Emma's men, including Captain Collins and First Mate Green, were killed. The remaining 8, under Second Mate Johansson, proceeded to navigate the captured yacht, going ahead in their original direction to see if any reason for the ordering back had existed. The next day, it appears, they raised and landed on a small island, although none is known to exist in that part of the ocean, and 6 of the men somehow died ashore, though Johansson is clearly reticent about this part of the story, and speaks only of their falling into a rock chasm. Later, it seems, he and one companion boarded the yacht and tried to manage her, but were beaten about by the storm of April 2nd. From that time till his rescue on the 12th, the man remembers little, and he does not even recall when William Bryden, his companion, died. Bryden's death reveals no apparent cause. It was probably due to excitement or exposure. Excitement? Huh? Okay. Cable advices from Dunedain report that the Alert was well known there as an island trader. That was a hard to read sentence for some reason. As an island trader and bore of an evil reputation along the waterfront. It was owned by a curious group of half-caste whose frequent meetings and night trips to the woods attracted no little curiosity, and it had set sail in great haste just after the storm and earth tremors of March 1st. Our Auckland correspondent gives Emma and her crew an excellent reputation, and Johansson is described as a sober and worthy man. The Admiralty will institute an inquiry on the whole matter beginning tomorrow, in which every effort will be made to induce Johansson to speak more freely than he has done hitherto. This was all together with a picture of the hellish image, but what a train of ideas it started in my mind. Here were new treasuries of data on the Cthulhu cult, and evidence that it had strange interests at sea as well as on land. What motive prompted the hybrid crew to order back the Emma as they sailed about with their hideous idol? What was the unknown island on which 6 of the Emma's crew had died, and about which the mate Johansson was so secretive? What had the Vice Admiralty's investigation brought about, and what was known of the noxious cult in Dunedain? And most marvelous of all, what deep and more than natural linkage of dates was this which gave a malign and now undeniable significance to the various turns of events so carefully noted by my uncle? March 1st, or February 28th according to the international dateline. Oh, yeah, duh. For some reason I forgot that February only has 28 days. According to the international dateline, the earthquake and storm had come. From Dunedain, the Alert and her noisome crew had darted eagerly back and forth as if imperiously summoned. And on the other side of the earth, poets and artists had begun to dream of a strange, dank, cyclopean city. Well, I'm not convinced Lovecraft knows what cyclopean means because he keeps using it. Also, as a capitalized word. Whatever. Also, the young sculptor had molded in his sleep the form of the dreaded Cthulhu. March 23rd, the tyranny of dates in the story right now. March 23rd, the crew of the Emma landed on an unknown island and left 6 men dead. And on that date, the dreams of sensitive men assumed a heightened vividness and darkened with dread of a giant monster's malign pursuit. Whilst an architect had gone mad and a sculptor had lapsed suddenly into delirium. And what of the storm of April 2nd, the date on which all dreams of the dank city ceased, and Wilcox emerged unharmed from the bondage of a strange fever? What of all this, and of those hints of old Castro about the sunken, star-born old ones and their coming reign, their faithful cult and their mastery of dreams? Was I tottering on the brink of cosmic horrors beyond man's power to bear? If so, they must be the horrors of the mind alone, for in some way the 2nd of April had put a stop to whatever monstrous menace had begun its siege of mankind's soul. That evening, after a day of hurried cabling and arranging, I bade my host adieu and took a train for San Francisco. In less than a month, I was in Dunedain, where, however, I found that little was known of the strange cult members who had lingered in the old sea taverns. Waterfront scum was far too common for special mention, though there was vague talk about one inland trip these rude mongrels had made, during which faint drumming and red flame were noted in the distant hills. In Auckland, I learned that Johansson had returned with yellow hair turned white after a perfunctory and inconclusive questioning at Sydney, and had thereafter sold his cottage in West Street and sailed with his wife to his old home in Oslo. Of his stirring experience, he would tell his friends no more than he had told the Admiralty officials, and all they could do was give me his Oslo address. After that, I went to Sydney and talked profitlessly with seamen and members of the Vice Admiralty Court. I saw the Alert, now sold and in commercial use, at Circular Quay in Sydney Cove, but gained nothing from its non-committal bulk. The crouching image, with its cuttlefish head, dragon body, scaly wings, and hieroglyphed pedestal, was preserved in the museum at Hyde Park, and I studied it long and well, finding it a thing of balefully exquisite workmanship, and with the same utter mystery, terrible antiquity, and unearthly strangeness of material which I had noted in Legrasse's smaller specimen. Geologists, the curator told me, had found it a monstrous puzzle, for they vowed that the world held no rock like it. Then I thought with a shudder of what old Castro had told Legrasse about the primal great ones. They had come from the stars and had brought their images with them. Shaken with such a mental revolution as I had never before known, I now resolved to visit Mate Johansson in Oslo. Sailing for London, I re-embarked at once for the Norwegian capital, and one autumn day landed at the trim wharfs in the shadow of Egeberg? I don't know. Johansson's address, I discovered, lay in the old town of King Harold Hardrada, which kept alive the name of Oslo during all the centuries that the greater city masqueraded as Christiana. I made up the brief trip by taxicab and knocked with palpitant heart at the door of a neat and ancient building with a plastered front. A sad-faced woman in black answered my summons, and I was stung with disappointment when she told me in halting English that Gustav Johansson was no more. He had not survived his return, said his wife, for the doings at sea in 1925 had broken him. He had told her no more than he told the public, but had left a long manuscript of technical matters, as he said, written in English, evidently in order to safeguard her from the peril of casual perusal. During a walk through a narrow lane near the Gothenburg dock, a bundle of papers falling from an attic window had knocked him down. Two Lascar sailors at once helped him to his feet, but before the ambulance could reach him, he was dead. Hold up. A bundle of papers. I mean, paper is heavy, and like a 2 or 3 story drop at least, if it was coming from the attic. Okay, yeah, okay, I can see that. Yeah. Getting smacked on top of the head by a big, thick, fat bundle of heavy paper. Yeah, I can see that killing a guy. Yeah, that passes. Checks out. Where was I? Lascar sailors. Physicians found no adequate cause for the end and laid it to heart trouble and a weakened constitution. No, dude, he just got nailed by some heavy-ass paper. That shit is heavy. A bundle of paper? No way, that just killed him. I now felt gnawing at my vitals that dark terror which I will never leave me till I too am at rest, accidentally or otherwise, persuading that the widow that my connection with her husband's technical matters was sufficient to entitle me to his manuscript. I bore the document away and began to read it on the London boat. It was a simple, rambling thing, a naive sailor's effort at a post-facto diary, and strove to recall day by day that last awful voyage. Excuse me. I cannot attempt to transcribe it verbatim in all its cloudiness and redundance, but I will tell its gist enough to show why the sound of the water against the vessel sides became so unendurable to me that I stopped my ears with cotton. Johansson, thank God, not know quite all, even though he saw the city and the thing. thing, but I shall never sleep calmly again when I think of the horrors that lurk ceaselessly behind life and time and space, and of those unhallowed blasphemies from elder stars which dream beneath the sea, known and favored by a nightmare cult, ready and eager to loose them on the world whenever another earthquake shall heave their monstrous stone city again to the sun and air. I'm not sure earthquakes work like that. Okay, whatever. Johansson's voyage had begun just as he told it to the Vice Admiralty. The Emma and ballast had cleared Auckland on February 20th. More dates, come on. And had felt the full force of that earthquake-born tempest, which must have heaped up from the sea bottom the horrors that filled men's dreams. Once more under control, the ship was making good progress when held up by the alert on March 22nd, and I could feel the mate's regret as he wrote of their bombardment and sinking. Of the swarthy cult fiends on the alert, he speaks with significant horror. There was some peculiarly abominable quality about them, which made their destruction seem almost a duty, and Johansson shows ingenious wonder at the charge of the ruthless brought against his party during the proceedings of the Court of Inquiry. Then, driven ahead by curiosity in their captured yacht under Johansson's command, the men sight a great stone pillar sticking out of the sea, and wherever the hell that is, come upon a coastline of mingled mud, ooze, and weedy cyclopean masonry, which can be nothing less than the tangible substance of Earth's supreme terror, the nightmare corpse city of R'lyeh, that was built in measureless aeons behind history by the vast, loathsome shapes that seeped down from the dark stars. There lay great Cthulhu and his hordes, hidden in green slimy vaults, and sending out, at last, after cycles of incalculable, the thoughts that spread fear to the dreams of the sensitive, and called imperiously to the faithful to come on a pilgrimage of liberation and restoration. All this Johansson did not suspect, but God knows he soon saw enough. I suppose that only a single mountaintop, the hideous monolith-crowned citadel whereon great Cthulhu was buried, actually emerged from the waters. When I think of the extent of all that which may be brooding down there, I almost wish to kill myself forthwith. Johansson and his men were awed by the cosmic majesty of this dripping Babylon of elder demons, and must have guessed without guidance that was nothing of this or of any sane planet. Awe at the unbelievable size of the greenish stone blocks, at the dizzying heights of the great carven monolith, and at the stupefying identity of the colossal statues and bas-reliefs of the queer image found in the shrine on the alert, is poignantly visible in every line of the mate's frightened description. Without knowing what futurism is like, Johansson achieved something very close to it when he spoke of the city. I don't think Lovecraft knows what futurism is like. For instead of describing any definite structure or building, he dwells only on broad impressions of vast angles and stone surfaces, surfaces too great to belong to anything right or proper for this earth. It's impious? I'm guessing impious, with horrible images and hieroglyphs. I mention his talk about angles because it suggests something Wilcox had told me of his awful dreams. He said that the geometry of the dream place he saw was abnormal, non-Euclidean. I am shocked that Lovecraft knows what that means. It does. And loathsomely redolent of spheres and dimensions apart from ours. Non-Euclidean means that Euclidean geometry means that it can be drawn up in the graphs that we know and love from like middle school and high school math classes. Like a circle always equals 360 degrees and triangles always equal however many degrees. 180, is that the total degrees of a triangle? I don't know, it's been like 20 plus years. But that's what Euclidean means. Non-Euclidean means that those shapes will have different totals in their angles. Which again, I kind of doubt Lovecraft knows that. And loathsomely redolent of spheres and dimensions apart from ours. Now an unlettered seaman felt the same thing whilst gazing at the terrible reality. Almost said realty for some reason. Reality. Johansen and his men landed at the sloping mud bank of this monstrous acropolis and clambered slipperily. I know that's not a real word. Clambered, slipping and sliding up over titan oozy blocks, which could have been no mortal staircase. The very sun of heaven seemed distorted when viewed through the polarizing miasma, welling out from the sea-soaked perversion. And twisted menace and suspense lurked leeringly in those crazily elusive angles of carven rock, where a second glance showed concavity after the first showed convexity. Something very like fright had come over all the explorers before anything more definite than rock and ooze and weed was seen. Each would have fled had he not feared the scorn of the others. It was only half-heartedly that they searched, vainly as it proved, for some portable souvenir to bear away. It was Rodriguez, the Portuguese, who climbed up the foot of the monolith and shouted of what he had found. The rest followed him and looked curiously at the immense carven door, with the now familiar squid dragon bas relief. It was, Johansen said, like a great barn door, and they all felt that it was a door because of the ornate lintel, threshold, and jambs about it. Though they could not decide whether it lay flat like a trap door or slantwise like an outside cellar door. As Wilcox would have said, the geometry of the place was all wrong. One could not be sure that the sea and the ground were horizontal, hence the relative position of everything else seemed phantasmally variable. Bryden pushed at the stone in several places without result. Then Donovan felt over it delicately around the edge, pressing each point separately as he went. He climbed interminably along the grotesque stone molding. That is, one would call it climbing if the thing was not after all horizontal. And the men wondered how any door in the universe could be so vast. Then, very softly and slowly, the acre great panel, goddamn, big ass door, began to give inward at the top, and they saw that it was balanced. Donovan slid, or somehow propelled himself down or along the jamb and rejoined his fellows, and everyone watched the queer recession of the monstrously carven portal. Breath. In this fantasy of prismatic distortion, it moved anomalously in a diagonal way, so that all the rules of matter and perspective seemed upset. Sure what that means. Moved anonymously in a diagonal way. Okay. The aperture was black, with a darkness almost material. That tenebrousness was indeed a positive quality, for it obscured such parts of the inner walls as ought to have been revealed, and actually burst forth like smoke from its aeon-long imprisonment, visibly darkening the sun as it slunk away into the shrunken and gibbous sky on flapping membranous wings. The odor arising from the newly opened depths was intolerable, and at length the quick-eared Hawkins thought he heard a nasty, slopping sound down there. Everyone listened, and everyone was listening still when it lumbered slobberingly into sight and gropingly squeezed its gelatinous green immensity through the black doorway into the tainted outside air of that poisoned city of madness. Poor Johansen's handwriting almost gave out when he wrote of this. Of the 6 men who never reached the ship, he thinks 2 perished of pure fright in that accursed instant. The thing cannot be described. There is no language for such abysms? Okay. Abysms of shrieking and immemorial lunacy. Such eldritch contradictions of all matter, force, and cosmic order. A mountain walked or stumbled. God. Sorry, I should have more feeling of that. God! What wonder that across the earth a great architect went mad, and poor Wilcox raved with a fever in that telepathic instant. The thing of the idols, the green, sticky spawn of the stars, had awakened to claim its own. The stars were right again, and what an age-old cult had failed to do by design, a band of innocent sailors had done by accident. Okay. There is no way now Vigintillion is a word. I'm Googling that right now. No way. I think Lovecraft made that the fuck up. Vigintillions, 2 L's. Okay, there's 2 different meanings. A cardinal number equal to 10 to the 63rd power, and a cardinal number equal to 10 to the 120th power. Originally, the 20th power of a million, 101,000, no, 10,120. Now, more usually, 1,063. Okay, it's a real word, and I have no idea what the hell that means. Don't ask me to do math at 2 in the morning after work. Okay, Lovecraft gets a pass on that one. That is an esoteric as fuck math term. After vigintillions of years, Great Cthulhu was loosed again, and ravening for delight. 3 men were swept up by the flabby claws before anybody turned. God rest them, if there be any rest in the universe. They were Donovan, Guerrera, and... Guerrera is a musician name that I haven't listened to in a while. Whatever. Brain just stopped at that because I recognize it. Anyways, there were Donovan, Guerrera, and Angstrom. Parker slipped as the other 3 were plunging frenziedly over endless vistas of green-crusted rock to the boat. And Johansson swears he was swallowed up by an angle of masonry, which shouldn't have been there. Okay, yeah, shouldn't have is correct. Okay, I don't know why my brain thought that was wrong. An angle which was acute, but behaved as if it were obtuse. So only Bryden and Johansson reached the boat and pulled desperately for the alert as the mountainous monstrosity flopped down the slimy stones and hesitated, floundering at the edge of the water. Steam had not been suffered to go down entirely, despite the departure of all hands for the shore, and it was the work of only a few moments of feverish rushing up and down between wheel and engines to get the alert underway. Slowly, amidst the distorted horrors of that indescribable scene, she began to churn the lethal waters, whilst on the masonry of that charnel shore, that was not of earth, the titan thing from the stars, slavered and gibbered like Polypheme cursing the fleeing ship of Odysseus. Then, bolder than the storied Cyclops, Great Cthulhu slid greasily into the water and began to pursue with the vast wave-raising strokes of cosmic potency. Bryden looked back and went mad, laughing shrilly as he kept on laughing at intervals till death found him one night in the cabin, whilst Johansson was wondering deliriously. But Johansson had not given out yet. Knowing that the thing could surely overtake the alert until steam was fully up, he resolved on a desperate chance, and setting the engine for full speed, ran lightning-like on deck and reversed the wheel. There was a mighty eddying and foaming in the noisome brine, and as the steam mounted higher and higher, the brave Norwegian drove his vessel head-on against the pursuing jelly, which rose above the unclean froth like the stern of a demon galley. The awful squid head, with the writhing feelers, came nearly up to the bowsprit of the sturdy yacht, but Johansson drove on relentlessly. There was a bursting, as of an exploding water. As of an exploding bladder, which is an oddly specific description, which I guess makes sense for knowing back then because people were closer to the animals they killed to eat in the 20s. I don't know. Maybe Lovecraft was just playing with a pig's bladder one day. Whatever. A slushy nastiness as of a cloven sunfish. Okay. A stench as of 1,000 open graves, and a sound that the chronicler would not put on paper. For an instant, the ship was befouled by an acrid and blinding green cloud, and then there was only a venomous seething astern, where, God in heaven, the scattered plasticity of that nameless sky spawn was nebulously recombining in its hateful original form, whilst its distance widening every second as the alert gained impetus from its mounting steam. That was all. After that, Johansson only brooded over the idol in the cabin and attended to a few matters of food for himself and the laughing maniac by his side, He did not try to navigate after the first bold flight, for the reaction had taken something out of his soul. Then came the storm of April 2nd, and the gathering of the clouds about his consciousness. There's a sense of spectral whirling through the liquid gulfs of infinity, of dizzying rides through reeling universes on a comet's tail, and of hysterical plunges from the pit to the moon, and from the moon back again to the pit. All livened by a cachinnating chorus of the distorted, hilarious elder gods and the green, bat-winged mocking imps of Tartarus. Out of that dream came rescue. The Vigilant, the Vice Admiralty Court, the streets of Dunedain. And, okay, it's probably not pronounced Dunedain, but I like that because it's a token reference, so whatever. It's Dunedain. And the long voyage back home to the old house by the Egeberg. Sorry, I have to say that like a Norwegian. Egeberg. Whatever. He could not tell. They would think him mad. He would write of what he knew before death came, but his wife must not guess. Death would be a boon if only it could blot out the memories. That was the document I read, and now I've placed it in a tin box beside the bas-relief and the papers of Professor Mango Angle. With it shall go this record of mine, this test of my own sanity, wherein is pieced together that which I hope may never be pieced together again. I have looked upon all that the universe has to hold of horror. No, you haven't. You got it all secondhand, you bitch. And even the skies of spring and the flowers of summer must ever afterward be poison to me. But I do not think my life will be long. As my uncle went, as poor Johansen went, so I shall go. I know too much, and the cult still lives. Cthulhu still lives too, I suppose, again in that chasm of stone, which has shielded him since the sun was young. His accursed city is sunken once more, for the Vigilant sailed over the spot after the April storm. But his ministers on earth still bellow and prance and slay around idol-capped monoliths in lonely places. He must have been trapped by the sinking whilst within his black abyss, or else the world would by now be screaming with fright and frenzy. Who knows the end? What has risen may sink, what has sunk may rise. Loathsomeness waits and dreams in the deep, and decay spreads over the tottering cities of men. A time will come, but I must not and cannot think. Let me pray that, if I do not survive this manuscript, my executors may put caution before audacity and see that it meets no other eye. That was The Call of Cthulhu by H.P. Lovecraft. That was pretty good. That is the racism. It wasn't nearly as racist as Rats in the Walls. Well, there was plenty of gentlemen in this story. A lot of mongrels. A lot of half-breeds. Just more classic New Englander racisms from Lovecraft. But that was an enjoyable story of indirectly discovering of Cthulhu and his cult. And I think that's a cool angle to take it, indirectly, secondhand, finding everything out, or at times third and fourth hand discovering stuff, and that being enough to drive the point of view to insanity. Yeah. I don't have too many other thoughts about it, honestly. Because the point of view never actually did anything, never went anywhere. It's all just kind of an interesting lore dump through a point of view, which is a good way to do lore dumps, I guess. Better than just a Lovecraft having a tism and going, and there's this and this and this, just making a giant chart of what everything is in his mythos. But yeah, conveniently on this next page, I think the next story we'll read is Pickman's Model, because I know that one is public domain. But I'll probably do that next week. Tomorrow, I am going to play more Starship Troopers Terran Command, the Urban Onslaught DLC. Picking back up the mission that I left off last week, and probably the mission after that, as time permits. And then Thursday, that's my wild card day now because I shifted my schedule around a little bit to move Divers Quest around. So either continuing Starship Troopers, maybe play Divers or something else. I haven't done world building in a while. But yeah. And then, of course, Thursday, Divers Quest. But that's it for tonight. Hope everyone has a fantastic Tuesday. I'll see you tomorrow night. Take care, everyone.